For PokerGaming.com, this is James Gwill. Event 7 of the 2010 World Series of Poker was a 2,500 deuce-to-7 lowball event. 291 players started in this event, however 30 of these players would reach the money. Day 1 was a minefield of pros and lowball specialists, and after the first day, the field was left with just 87 players, looking to not only make the money in this event, but also win the bracelet. Now, the money was reached on day 2, and among the pros that made the money in this event were Elia Lesra, Alan Kessler, John Turner, Raymond Davis, Ted Forrest, and Greg Mueller. Day 2 was played down to the final 8 players, and those 8 returned on Thursday to play to the final table of 7 players. The first person to bust on day 3 was, unfortunately, the final table bubble boy. Ted Juergens was all in pre-draw against Raphael Zimmerman. Zimmerman drew twice and then stood pat on the last draw. He then revealed that he had a 7-6, and unfortunately Juergens could not beat it, and ended up finishing in 8th place. The final table was set for the event with Don McNamara, Peter Gellingser, David Chu, and Raphael Zimmerman all at the final table. Raphael Zimmerman started as the final table chip leader with 565,000 in chips. Sanjiro Uchida was the first player eliminated from the final table. He was all in after the first draw and was called by Raphael Zimmerman. Uchida only ended up making a queen after 3 draws, and Zimmerman tabled a 9-8 to send Uchida out in 7th place. $17,903 was Uchida's prize for a very strong run in this event. Leonard Martin was soon all in after the first draw against Peter Gellingser and Don McNamara. Gellingser ended up forcing McNamara to fold out of the pot so that he could isolate Martin. Martin drew 1 on both the second and the third draws, and Gellingser ended up drawing 1 on the second draw and ended up standing pat on the third draw. Martin only could end up making a pair of 7s, while Gellingser made an 8-6 to send Martin out in 6. He took home $24,723 for his finish. Jameson Painter was next out when he was all in after the first draw against Zimmerman. Painter drew 2 on the second draw, and Zimmerman drew 1. On the last draw, Zimmerman stood pat and Painter drew 1. Painter only could manage an ace high, while Zimmerman made a 10 high. Painter finished in 5th place and took home $34,843. David Chu was the next player out when he was all in pre-draw for $20,000 against Don McNamara, who stood pat from the original deal. Chu drew cards on the first and second draws and ended up standing pat on the third. He then showed an 8-7 low, but McNamara had him just slightly beat by showing an 8-6 low. David Chu finished in 4th place and took home $50,157. Don McNamara was all in after the second draw against Peter Gellingser. McNamara had stood pat after the second draw, and Gellingser decided to take 1. Apparently, he had a 10 and was trying to improve. McNamara tabled a jack, and when Gellingser looked at his card, he discovered that he had improved to a 9. As such, Don McNamara was out in 3rd place and took home $73,803. A heads-up play between Raphael Zimmerman and Peter Gellingser started with Zimmerman up about $1.39 million to the $730,000 of Gellingser. Gellingser then turned around and made a strong comeback off of the strength of making a number 1 to take down a huge pot. For those unaware of what a number 1 is, a number 1 is a 7-5-4-3-2, which is a wheel and deuce-7 lowball. Then with the limits of $30,000 and $60,000, Raphael Zimmerman was all in after the second draw against Gellingser. Gellingser stood pat and held a 9-7. Zimmerman actually had a chance to outdraw him as he held an 8-6-5-3 and drew 1. Unfortunately, he ended up drawing another 6, and Peter Gellingser was our champion. Raphael Zimmerman finished runner-up for the event and took home $111,686. Peter Gillingser is the champion of the 25,000 Deuce to 7 lowball bracelet event. He took home the bracelet and $180,730. Congratulations. For PokerGaming.com, this is James Will. For more, keep your browser pointed to PokerGaming.com as we bring you coverage and recaps from the 2010 World Series of Poker.